Hello again. I strongly suspect that viewers will not be overly surprised to learn that around 40% of the patients detained in Broadmoor Criminal Lunatic Asylum are black men. Since only around 4% of the general population of this country are black, this means that they are hugely overrepresented there. The pattern is similar in locked psychiatric units in our larger cities. The inquiry into the case of Valdo Cavalcante, the black schizophrenic who stabbed to death three random strangers in Nottingham a few years ago, revealed something quite interesting. This is that he was only free because professionals had been reluctant to detain him in a psychiatric unit because he was dangerously mad, on the grounds that too many black people were already being sectioned and held against their will. Locking him up would have increased the figures for black men being held in this way, and so it seemed better to the professional to let him go on his way, even if that meant that he ended up killing somebody. To some, this disproportionate detention of black people in mental hospitals is symptomatic of racism by the medical profession, but to others it is simply a reflection of the fact that black men are at least 8 or 9 times as likely to develop schizophrenia, and when they do so, they often become violent and attack others. Both of these things are caused by biological factors. I'm sure that many viewers will have noticed a number of news items which detail aggressive and irrational behaviour by black men, which results in the injury and death of innocent people. Privately, many of us have decided that going mad and then attacking strangers is just something to which black men in particular seem to be peculiarly prone. This is actually quite true. One of the differences between black people and white is the greater prevalence in those of African origin for the biological markers indicating susceptibility to schizophrenia. In some countries, Britain for example, black people are 9 times as likely as white people to be diagnosed with a psychosis. Schizophrenia is, at least partially, a genetic disorder. That is to say, a genetic disposition or risk might exist and the disease itself develop under certain circumstances which are related to the environment. There is no one gene which tells scientists if a person will develop schizophrenia. It's not like having blue eyes. Instead, there are many weak genetic markers. The more of which are present, the more likely will it be that an individual will ultimately have schizophrenia. This is known as the Polygenic Risk Score, or PRS for short. In 2018, the journal Psychiatric Genetics published a paper which revealed that the PRS for schizophrenia for those of African origin was very much higher than it was for white people from Europe or North America. So great was the difference between the PRS for different ancestral groups or races that in the case of Africans and Europeans, they hardly even overlap. There was some doubt as to how best to interpret these results. It's not necessary to go too deeply into the pros and cons of the argument. The fact remains that the genetic heritage of black people shows different levels of risk for schizophrenia than white people have. This may well shed light on why schizophrenia is apparently found more frequently in Britain and the United States among black people than it is among whites. It may not be the whole explanation, but it's almost certainly a large part of it. This explains perhaps why more black people than white develop schizophrenia, but it doesn't explain the way in which this illness often seems to make them murderously aggressive. White men with schizophrenia are more likely to harm themselves than they are others. With black men, the desire to harm all too often turns outward and prompts them to be violent towards other people. The explanation for this aspect of the thing may be found in another physical attribute of black people. After the onset of puberty, black youths usually have more testosterone circulating in their bloodstream than white boys, and this might well have the effect of exacerbating any inclination towards aggressive behavior, challenging authority, or fighting or attacking people. In the United States, it has been observed that higher levels of testosterone in inmates of the prison system correlate to increased incidence of confrontations, often violent, between such prisoners and guards at the prison. The more testosterone in a man's body, the more likely he is to exhibit aggression towards others and to be unable to restrain this behavior. That black men have a lot more testosterone circulating in their bodies after puberty is, of course, why black men have far higher rates of cancer of the prostate than white men. The hormone promotes growth of this particular kind of cancer. None of what I've said is at all controversial, and nor is it really in doubt. Black men are far more likely to develop paranoid schizophrenia than other people, and when they do suffer from it, it is much more likely to manifest itself in violence towards others, largely because of the high levels of testosterone in their bodies. When we see a case such as Valdo Calacani, of a black man who develops schizophrenia and then goes off on a stabbing spree, we are seeing nothing more than the playing out of natural biological differences between black men and white. It may perhaps be regrettable that this is a vivid example of the differences between the black African and white Caucasian races, but there it is. It is nonetheless so, despite whatever our political views might be on the matter. All this has been known for years, and in the description to this video, I give a few references for those who might wish to explore the scientific background and evidence of what I've been talking about here. Different races are, well, different. There is nothing to be done about this. It is simply how the world is. Anyway, I thought it worth talking about that because lately hardly a day seems to pass without we're reading about a black man behaving in an extraordinarily aggressive way. And after he's arrested, we are told that he's suffering from a mental illness. This is what's going on.